House-sitting sounds like the easiest money in the world. Water the plants, feed the cat, bring in the mail, sleep in a house that isn't yours. But every house-sitter learns the same lesson eventually. A house is never really empty. It has routines you don't know about, visitors you weren't warned about, and sounds that belong to somebody else's life. For 3 sitters, the easiest money in the world came with interest. The Delgados found me through a neighborhood app. 2 weeks in June, a tidy brick house with a garden Mrs. Delgado loved more than most people love their children. Water deep, not orphan, she told me, and left me 3 pages of notes in perfect teacher's handwriting. Trash on Thursdays. Cat gets half a can. The porch light stays on. Nothing about a neighbor. I want that on the record, the way I eventually put it on the record for 2 very patient police officers. The notes said nothing about a neighbor. He introduced himself the first morning, while I was still figuring out which key opened the side door. 60s, trim, pressed collar, the kind of man who irons his weekends. "You must be the sitter," he said, from the sidewalk. Not his sidewalk, I'd learn, just the sidewalk. "I'm Walt. I keep an eye on the place when they're away. Have for years." And then, smiling, before I'd said one word, "Trash goes out Thursday. She likes the porch light on." That landed as reassuring. I know how that sounds now, but think about it. He knew the family's routines. He used their names. He was standing in warm daylight, wearing a golf shirt. Scam artists are supposed to be young men with clipboards, not tidy grandfathers who know your trash day. So when I found him in the backyard on day 3, standing over the tomato beds with his hands clasped behind his back like a museum visitor, my first instinct was actually to apologize, like I'd interrupted him. He said Mrs. Delgado liked him to check the soil. He said it kindly, not moving, and a full second too late I heard the part that mattered. The gate had been latched. I'd latched it myself. Walt had let himself in, and something about the way he stood there, comfortable, proprietary, patient, made the apology die in my throat. I said, "I'll take it from here." He looked at me for a moment with an expression I still can't file. Not anger, assessment. Then he thanked me, the way you'd thank a waiter, and let himself back out through the gate he shouldn't have been able to open. I texted Mrs. Delgado that night, keeping it light. Also, should Walt from across the street still have garden access? He's been by a couple times. 6 hours later, from a cruise ship somewhere with bad Wi-Fi, the reply that changed the temperature of that house by 20 degrees. Who is Walt? We went back and forth in bursts as her signal allowed, and every answer made it worse. No neighbor watched the house. No one was supposed to check any soil. They didn't know a Walt, and here's the part that made me start moving room to room, turning on the lights. Nobody across the street matched him. She named the neighbors, a young couple, a family with twins, a widow named Ruth. I stood at the front window with the lamp off and looked at the 3 houses across the street, and I realized I had never actually seen Walt come out of one of them or go into one of them. He was just always between, on the sidewalk, at the fence, in the yard, A man whose entire existence, now that I audited it, was the space around this one house. The police were kind and thorough, and they did find him. That's not the unresolved part. Officer Pruitt spotted him 2 streets over on the 4th day, matched my description, pressed collar and all. And this is where the story stops being about a creepy neighbor and becomes the thing I actually can't shake. Walt, his real name doesn't matter, didn't live 2 streets over. He didn't live anywhere in the neighborhood. He'd been renting rooms across town since spring, and on his phone were photos of 4 houses. Not of anything happening, just houses from the sidewalk, taken over and over across weeks, the way you'd photograph a crush. All 4 were homes whose owners traveled. All 4 had sitters. 2 of the sitters, when police contacted them, described their helpful neighbor, kept an eye on the place for years, knew the trash day, knew about the porch light. Different name at each house, same pressed collar. He'd learned the routines the same way I finally understood he'd opened the latched gate, by watching, longer and more patiently than a sane person watches anything. Weeks of it. The trash schedule isn't a secret. It's on the curb every Thursday. The porch light isn't a secret. It's on every night. He collected the visible pieces of a family's life and wore them like a uniform, and the uniform worked on me, on the sitters before me, because we all made the same assumption. A stranger wouldn't know these things. They charged him with trespassing. That's all standing in yards gets you, it turns out. The detective told me, off the record, walking me to my car, that men like that are almost never burglars. Burglars want the house empty. He said he waited until there was a young woman alone in it, and then he practiced coming closer. First the sidewalk, then the fence, then the garden, room by room from the outside in, testing each threshold to see if his uniform still worked. The Delgados came home to a safe house and a sitter who slept with furniture against the doors. I still house-sit, carefully, but I'll leave you with the question I ask every homeowner now, the one that gets me strange looks and twice now has gotten me a long, uncomfortable pause instead of an answer. Is there anyone who thinks he's allowed to be here? Ask it. Because the scariest man in the world isn't the one who breaks in, it's the one who's decided, somewhere in the patient dark of his own head, that he doesn't have to. The instruction list at the Marsh house was 2 pages and completely ordinary, except item 9. Feed the koi, rotate the thermostat, packages go inside the mudroom, and then, typed in the same casual font as everything else, between the koi and the thermostat like it was nothing. 9. The phone in the hall may ring at night. You don't need to answer it. It's an old line. We keep meaning to have it removed. I read that and thought, landline spam, robocalls for dead accounts. My grandmother's phone did the same thing. If anything, item 9 made me trust the Marshes more. Thorough people, warning me about a nuisance so I wouldn't lose sleep. I was there for 18 nights while they were in Portugal. The phone rang on 11 of them. Always between 2 and 3 in the morning. I never clocked it exactly at first, just the dead hours. And always 4 rings, never 3, never 5. 4 rings and then silence. And the silence after a phone stops ringing in a big dark house is its own specific sound. I got to know it well. The phone itself was in the front hall on a little half-moon table, cream-colored, rotary, older than me, the kind of object that gets kept as decor.
The first few nights I did the mature thing, pillow overhead, item 9, not my problem. By night 6, I'd started lying awake ahead of it, listening for it, which is the thing about a recurring sound at night. It doesn't have to be loud to own you. It just has to be reliable. Night 8 is when the details started to itch. I was in the kitchen getting water at 2 a.m., closer to the hall than my bedroom was, and when the phone rang, I stood in the doorway and watched it. 4 rings. And on the 4th ring, as it died, I heard, clearly from the dark at the top of the stairs, a click, a single soft plastic click, exactly like a receiver being lifted somewhere else in the house. Old landlines have extensions. Every extension answers the same line. I stood in that hallway with my glass of water and told myself, houses click. Radiators, cooling wood, houses click. Then I went to bed and did not sleep, because underneath my reasonable explanation, in the place where the body keeps its own records, I knew the difference between a house settling and a phone being answered. The next day I searched every room, and here is inventory which I did twice. There was no other phone in that house, no extension in the main bedroom, the office, the basement. One cream rotary phone on one half-moon table, and a phone jack, empty, faceplate slightly newer than the wall around it, at the top of the stairs, outside what the Marshes used as a sewing room. An empty jack where an extension used to be. You can guess the shape of the next 3 nights. Ring, 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 click. Me downstairs with every light on, the hallway phone silent in its cradle, and the click coming from an empty jack outside a sewing room. On the second to last night, I did the thing you're yelling at me to do or not do, depending on what kind of person you are. At 2:40 a.m., when the ringing started, I picked up the hall phone on ring 2. Not static. That's what I need you to understand. Line noise, yes, a long-distance hiss like a recording of wind, but organized around a presence, the way a room is organized around someone standing in it. And a woman's voice far down inside the hiss said conversationally, mid-sentence, like I'd walked in on a call that had been going on for years, "He's not going to come in off that porch until somebody tells him supper's on, so go on and tell him." A pause, warm, waiting. Then, closer, directly to me, and it knew I was new. I will swear forever that it knew. "Well, hey there, sugar. You're not Carol." I hung up. I'd love to dress it up for you, but that's the ending of that night. I put the receiver down like it was hot, unplugged the phone from the wall entirely, put it in the mudroom under a laundry basket, and sat in the kitchen until sunrise. And at 2-something the next morning, the last night, my bags already packed, from the front hall, from a cream rotary phone that was unplugged and under a basket in a different room, 4 rings, and upstairs, the click. The Marshes came home tanned and happy, and I did my professional duty at the door with the keys and the mail. And then I broke and asked about item 9, what the old line was, who used to answer it. Mr. Marsh looked at his wife the way men look when a thing they've agreed not to discuss walks in wearing shoes. And Mrs. Marsh, Carol Marsh, whose mother had lived in that house for 40 years, whose mother's sewing room still had its empty jack, whose mother used to call her sister long distance every night after supper. Carol said very quietly, not really to me, "Mama never could let a phone ring." They still keep meaning to have the line removed. I checked last Christmas. I send Carol a card. We're bonded the way people who share one strange thing are bonded. The answer was the same as every year. The phone company, apparently, has no record of an active line at that address. There's nothing to remove. There has been nothing to remove since 2009. Item 9 stays on the list, word for word, because the next sitter deserves to sleep, and because Carol told me the one time they boxed the phone up entirely, the whole cradle into the attic, something rang anyway. The house just did it, from memory.
My last house sit, and I mean last. I manage a plant store now and touch nobody's keys but my own. Was supposed to be the easy kind. Big new build on a cul-de-sac, all glass and gray paint. Owners in Singapore for a month, settling a job transfer. No pets, no plants that mattered, no item 9. Just exist in the house so it isn't empty, and forward anything that looks official. The wife, Priya, said something at the handoff that I'd replay later with a completely different soundtrack. Honestly, we just don't like the idea of people not knowing someone's home. Week 1 was silent luxury. Week 2, the house started getting visitors. The first was a couple in their 20s who pulled into the driveway on a Sunday, got out, and just looked at the house, openly, the way you look at a thing you have business with, pointing at the roofline, cupping hands at the front window. When I opened the door, they startled like I was the trespasser, apologized in a tangle, and drove off. Curb appeal, I figured. New development, nosy people. The second visitor, on Wednesday, was a man alone, 40s, who didn't come to the door. He walked the property line. He took photos of the side yard, the fence, the meter. When I stepped out and asked if I could help him, he checked his phone and asked a question that made no sense from a stranger in a driveway and total sense a week later in a police report. Is the 4-bedroom still available? Available? I said something like, "This is a private home," and he left, annoyed, not embarrassed, annoyed, like I'd wasted his afternoon. I told myself, wrong address, GPS glitch. I did not tell Priya because it was nothing, and this is the sentence every person in one of these stories gets to keep forever. I decided it was nothing. Saturday morning at 8:40, a moving truck stopped in front of the house, not a big rig, a rental box truck, the kind you drive yourself, followed by a minivan, and out of the minivan came a family. Parents, a grandmother, 3 kids, one still in pajamas. They came up the walk with folders and juice boxes and the specific, terrible happiness of people arriving at a place they've been waiting for. And the father, holding a printed lease agreement, put a key into the front door of the house I was standing inside of. The key didn't work because keys made from lockbox photos usually don't, but I want you to sit inside that half-second with me. I'm in the hallway in socks, and the front door handle is turning, and through the glass panel there are 7 people on the porch who believe with their whole hearts that they live here. The next hour was the strangest of my life and the saddest. The father showed me the listing, the house, this house, on a rental site, gorgeous photos, way below market rent, military family relocating, God bless. Some of the photos were the owner's own, pulled from an old sale listing, but 4 of them, 4, were current. My coffee cup on the counter, my laptop on the sofa, my towel on the rack. Photos taken inside the house within the last 2 weeks while I was living in it. The landlord had been messaging this family for a month, warm, chatty, scripture in his email signature. He'd collected first month, last month, and a deposit by wire transfer, $6,200 from a family with 3 kids, for a house he did not own and walked through like a guest. The man from Wednesday, near as anyone can figure, or the couple from Sunday doing his exterior shots. The police think he got inside the way these guys usually do, posing as an inspector or utility check during the previous sitter stint, or during the 4-day gap before I arrived, when the lockbox from the owner's realtor was, it turned out, still mounted beside the garage, a gap when nobody was home, and nobody knew nobody was home. Priya flew back early, not for the house, for the family. She and her husband ended up helping them with a lawyer, which tells you who the good people in this story are. The scammer was never caught. He was messaging the family cheerfully right up until the morning they arrived, and then the account evaporated, the way accounts do, and somewhere he is being someone else's warm, chatty landlord. I've read up on it since. It's called a rental scam. It happens thousands of times a year, and the thing the articles never capture is what it looks like on a porch. 3 kids and a grandmother and a truck full of furniture standing in front of a stranger in socks, all of you realizing at different speeds. So here's what I do now, and what I'd ask you to do, because this is the rare story from this channel where you can actually do something. If you're away, or if you're the sitter, check the listings. Just search the address every week or two, the way you'd check a smoke alarm. It takes 30 seconds to find out whether somewhere out there your empty house is having an open house. Because the scariest thing that came to that door was never the man with the camera. It was a family with juice boxes and a lease. Proof that for a month while I slept inside it, someone had been quietly selling the house around me, room by room, photo by photo, and I never heard a thing.
If you've made it this far, tonight, before bed, ask yourself the house-sitter's question. Who else thinks they're allowed to be here? Subscribe to the hollow dial, because time doesn't heal, it haunts. And if you've got a true house-sitting story of your own, leave it in the comments. We're listening. And so is something else.